After taking them back to Zwillingstern, their carriage went north along another highway. It sped up immensely, conveying them to the fringes of the great forest of Tob within a half-hour and arriving at the southern shores of a large lake 10 minutes later. Lady Wagner referred to it as the Great Lake, so Rangobart had expected something similar to the larger lakes in the Baharuth Empire, but it was small enough that he could see the forest on the other side. The Soul Eaters pulled them into the lot of a stone building that stood in stark contrast to the wooden thatched structures on the shores below. Rangobart wrinkled his nose slightly at the odors of the nearby marshes carried on the cool wind. Looming over the forested foothills to the northeast were the snow-capped peaks of the Azalizia Mountains. Just looking at the wintry vistas sent a chill through his body. If they filled in that marsh, Dimir said, a place like this would be ideal for a bunch of summer villas. It's cool and has a nice view and everything. Maybe the demi-humans living here thought the same thing, Rangobart said. Yes, but no, Lady Wagner said. They might hold that sentiment, but tribes at this level of civilization have more practical concerns, like having a reliable source of food and clean water. Lady Wagner speaks truly, a throaty voice came from the direction of the nearby building. Countless wars have been waged over the ages for our Great Lake. Not only between different races, but between tribes of the same race, as well. They turned to find a reptilian creature the size of a death knight walking towards them. An entourage of its lessers came in 2 rows behind him. Welcome to the Lizardman Alliance village, its thick, black scales shimmered in the sunlight as it spoke. I am Shazharyu Shasha, High Chieftain of the Lizardman Alliance. High Chieftain, I thought the Sorcerer's Kingdom used normal court ranks. Where does this guy fit into all of it? According to the Imperial Army, large demi-human tribes could occupy the territorial equivalent of a barony. That, however, varied widely depending on the race of demi-human, and Rangobart wasn't familiar with lizardmen at all. This is Frianne Gushmund, Countess of Waldenstein and head court mage of the Baharuth Empire. It is a pleasure to meet you, High Chief Shasha. Frianne lowered her head in a curtsy. The lizardman's pointed snout came down to Frianne's height as he regarded her. Is this what a human looks like when they're carrying eggs? Guess how many? Lady Wagner asked. 3, no, 4. The average human household has 5 children, Lady Wagner told him. Huh? I never realized that humans laid such large clutches. It's hard being a human. Out of those 5 children, 3 are usually lost to predators, starvation, or poor health. I see, High Chief Shasha bobbed his head. Such is the way of the world. I hope for the best for you and your family, Lady Waldenstein. Thank you, High Chief Shasha. Apparently, the lizardman had been instructed in human customs, but not human biology. Countess Wagner took a step to the side and gestured to Rangobart. This is Rangobart Roburbad, Viscount of Undecided. It's good to meet you, Lord Undecided, the lizardman lord said. To father such a large clutch, you must be a mighty chieftain indeed. Eh? Rangobart isn't my mate, Frianne said. Why are you so quick to cut in on that part, but not the other? Is that so? I was told each party would be a human lord and their family. In that case, this one. The lizardman's reptilian gaze went to Dimir. Ew, no. Dimir cried. Moo, humans are complicated. High Chief Shasha gave Rangobart what he thought was a look of sympathy. Don't let it get you down, Lord Undecided. I'm sure there's a fine woman for you out there somewhere, just Rangobart is fine. Once introductions for both sides were completed, the lizardmen led them into the stone building. What he could see of the interior was a clean-looking office that wouldn't seem out of place anywhere in human society. Behind the front desk stood a pale beauty whose voluptuous body filled out her dark blue uniform. Dimir said, there's a vampire here, too. That's a vampire? She did possess the otherworldly beauty attributed to vampires that had evolved into more powerful forms. He supposed the glowing crimson gaze should have been a dead giveaway that she was undead. Yup, Lady Wagner said. The local vampire post office is in this building. It used to be out on the water, but we moved it over to the highway once it was done. The central administration has their office upstairs. How do they fit in with the local administration? Lady Waldenstein asked. Every tribe still rules itself, Lady Wagner said. The staff from the central administration helps to transcribe their business into formal records. They'll also advise each tribe on official procedures and identify services that they might want to take advantage of.
It is quite the boon, High Chief Shasha said.
The Sorceress Kingdom has adopted the ways and language of the humans,
which my people are unfamiliar with.
At the same time,
they do not force us to live according to those ways.
They came out of the opposite end of the building, which put them at the top of a long path leading down to the marshes along the shore. He couldn't make much sense out of what the lizard men were doing aside from the ones carrying goods around in wicker baskets. His eyes followed a few of them, trying to see if they would help him identify warehouses and workshops based on what they were carrying. Since these two are wearing such long garments, High Chief Shasha gestured to Frian and Dimair.
We'll use the boardwalk to get around.
Is there anything you'd like to see first?
It's their first time in a demi-human settlement like this, Lady Wagner said. Imperials don't get out much.
We've been to Carnassus before, Lady Waldenstein said defensively.
But you're right that they aren't in any way similar.
The paved walkway was replaced with a wooden one partway down to the settlement. Lizardmen stopped to watch them curiously as they entered through its wooden gate. The 5 lizardman tribes that dwell here once lived in their respective villages along the south side of Three Great Lake, High Chief Shasha said. It was only after we were conquered by the Sorcerer King that our populations were consolidated into this single village. Rangobart scanned the surroundings for signs of past battles, but saw none. The vast marsh probably swallowed any evidence of a conflict within a few seasons. How long ago was this conquest? Rangobart asked.
Over 2 winters back. The lizardman's thick tail snaked back and forth as they walked along.
All 5 tribes joined forces to fight.
We thought we were doing well for a while, but then we were thoroughly squashed.
You don't look squashed, Dimair said.
I don't?
The tail stopped, then I must be recovering faster than I thought. A rasping laugh slid through the air and the tail started swaying again.
Baroness Saradnik was right,
High Chief Shasha said. The civilized concept of war is not the same as ours.
She told us that it is excessive in its impersonality.
Demi-human raids against the Empire can be quite brutal, Frian noted.
I have no grounds to agree or disagree on that point, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were true.
Neither would I deny it. Raiding others and being raided in return was a normal thing for us not long ago. This is not what I speak of, however.
They stopped at the shore of the lake, where rows of wooden poles were sticking out of the water.
This fish farm is a technique of raising food introduced by my brother a few years ago. Over the years, it has seen constant improvement and, through it, I believe that I can understand what the Baroness spoke of. The wilderness tribes, as I've heard the humans like to call us, live close to nature. We feed on it and it feeds on us, and this applies to all of the tribes that live at this level of civilization. For us, there is always a very reachable limit to what is possible, and that limit is defined by the daily realities that we face. If a tribe goes to war, any losses it sustains affect its chances of survival. A hunter may make for an excellent warrior, but hunters becoming injured or even dying in war means that the people that they supported as hunters will die of starvation. Our lives were balanced on a knife's edge where what you humans consider minor things may have spelt the end of our people. The lizardman lord gestured to the fish farm.
This, he said, ends that way of life.
Instead of hunters, you have farmers and food can be far more reliably produced by anyone without any of the risks that hunters face. With this new, reliable source of food, those who spend all of their time trying to survive can do other things. They can become weavers, potters, warriors, anything that their society has a demand for. That is essentially the tale of any civilization's rise, Frian nodded.
But you speak of it as if it's wrong.
Not wrong, the High Chief shook his head. It is natural to desire the prosperity of one's people, after all. What she warned us about was becoming detached from realities that would in turn lead us to those excesses of impersonality. I admit that I do not wholly understand it. She is a far wiser being than this simple lizardman chief, and all of the tribal elders agree with her. By the way, would you like to buy some fish? Eh? It's their main export at the moment, Countess Wagner said. Yes, the lizardman said, we would like to raise funds to develop new industries and find new ways forward for my people. What sort of dirty tactic is this? It was a very difficult approach to deal with as a noble. Simply put, a lord was asking another lord for a trade agreement that would help develop their domain. Not only did it tug on their sense of empathy, but it also set off the myriad of complex political, social, and economic calculations that nobles were raised to consider, as well.
I wouldn't mind, Lady Waldenstein said.
But my fief doesn't have a very large population. The volume of trade between us probably won't be as large as you'd probably like.
Not at all.
In fact, I was worried that we wouldn't have enough.
Hey. Someone bring out the liquor. I'm pregnant, so I really shouldn't.
Is that so? What about you,
Lord Undecided?
I'm sorry, Rangobart said, my land hasn't undergone any development, nor does it have any inhabitants. High Chieftain Sasha's visage shifted into an unfamiliar expression.
I see.
So that is why this one rejected you so vehemently just now. You must become a greater man to attract the females that you desire. This is an ironclad rule of the world. Work hard,
Lord Undecided. This damn savage.
Work hard,
Lord Undecided, Lady Wagner said.
Work hard,
Lord Undecided, said Lady Waldenstein. Rangobart sighed.
From the fish farms along the lake shore, they went to the village's central cluster of buildings. As with the other locations in the Sorceress Kingdom that they had visited, the undead were present but the people seemed to pay them no mind. This is where most of everything happens, their host told them. Our means are nothing compared to the great human settlements in the plains, but we make do with what we can. Over here is the market. They were led to a walkway that was lined by rows of thatch-roofed stands on either side. Rangobart supposed that some things would look the same no matter where they were or who was doing the selling. Frianne picked up a patterned blanket woven out of unfamiliar fabric.
I see many goods that could be sold in human villages, Lady Waldenstein said.
Have you considered exporting them?
We already do, High Chieftain Shasha replied.
Our village is an industrial center in this part of the Great Forest of Tob.
Well, I say that, but it is as you can see.
Our production is limited and trade consists of merchants from the forest tribes exchanging raw resources for finished goods. Levels of prosperity similar to that of the human lands is still a far-off dream for the tribes of the Great Forest. The forest tribes have merchants?
Rangobart frowned.
It wasn't always so, the lizardman replied, but a human lord came some time ago and set up trading outposts across the area. Now, every tribe has a merchant. Some of the larger ones have several. Rangobart glanced at Countess Wagner, who was smiling off to the side. Was she the one responsible for integrating the tribes of the Great Forest into the economy of the Sorceress Kingdom? Human lords didn't usually promote trade with wilderness tribes for obvious reasons. Lady Wagner was a noble, but she also gave off the distinct air of a magnate's daughter. You mentioned that you plan on developing new industries for your people with your trade surplus, Rangobart said. Was there anything particular that you had in mind? That is something we're still exploring, High Chief Shasha said. But that exploration in itself requires resources. For now, we've managed to set up basic versions of the industries that our travelers have seen elsewhere. Some are familiar to us, such as weaving, but the tools that the humans employ are very different. Others we were surprised were possible in our marshy home, such as blacksmithing. Speaking of which, that one has become quite popular. Why is that? Are lizardmen naturally inclined towards blacksmithing?
No, the lizardman lord rubbed the back of his head with a clawed hand. It's something of a selfish reason. We lizardmen are cold-blooded, and forges are nice and warm. But it is not as if we haven't found things that we are well suited to. For instance, while we may not excel at metalwork like the dwarves, we're well suited to mining in marshlands like this. In the winter, especially, our people go out to find ores just so they have an excuse to loiter near the forge fire. Mining. In a marsh? It surprised us, too. Our colony to the south learned it from the humans there. We have been using wood and bone tools for countless generations, never realizing that we trod upon mineral wealth the entire time. I was shocked when my nephew came to visit one day and declared that half of the stones I used to ring my fire pit were actually iron ore. After that, well, we turned up a small mountain of the stuff. Those who became particularly adept at this new form of mining are even able to discover gemstones and precious metals. I see, Rangobart nodded. But what about fuel? Don't tell me you're also mining something like heatstone. Wouldn't that be nice? We could have, what did they call it again? A hot spring? Anyway, we normally burn peat for our fires here and that seems to do well enough for the clay bloomeries we use. We've got an endless supply of it here. There's some trick to turn it into charcoal,
which they say is better,
but we're still figuring that out.
Does the Sorceress Kingdom not offer you technical assistance?
Lady Waldenstein asked.
They set up all of those trading posts and built this highway, didn't they?
High Chief Shasha turned to address Frian's question. They helped us with all sorts of things, he said.
At first, it was covering for our people's food shortages and building this new village for our tribes. After that, they made some improvements to the fish farms, taught us how to create a proper village economy that was compatible with far-off places, and built the highway that you used to come here. At the same time, however, our elders worried that it was too much.
What do you mean by that?
Moo, this may sound silly to you, as what we have been introduced to is considered commonplace to your people, but the best way I can put it was that we were receiving things without deserving them. Gaining new power without understanding it. Learning new techniques without learning of their effects on our home. When we were conquered, our people were promised prosperity, but, after seeing some of the world beyond our humble village, many believe that too much prosperity at once may ruin us instead. We must learn as only we can learn, for no one else can teach us how to be lizard men.
That sounds like something that Baroness Saradnik would say, Countess Waldenstein said. If she has, I have not heard it.
She only pinned the tongue of one of our warriors to the ground after visiting us and then left. Lord Cocytus gave us an earful after that and we had to reflect on how things were going. Dimmaear's mouth fell open, forming a large O the size of her spectacle lenses. Having seen her fight in person, Rangobart did not doubt that the Baroness was capable of doing what the Lizardman claimed. Our experience with the Sorceress Kingdom has been that they...
Frian paused for a moment.
Well, I suppose one could say that they insisted that we optimize how things were done in the Empire. I thought we would see something similar in the Sorceress Kingdom.
Perhaps our situations are different, the High Chief said.
Did they teach you humans many new things?
I can't say that they have, Frian replied. The best way to put it is that they did some things to stabilize the Empire, which allowed us to reallocate our available resources. It was a very loose way to phrase things, but perhaps it was for the best.
Lizardman civilization was clearly not advanced enough that their common sense matched.
Then maybe there is a lesson involved in there, as well, the Lizardman Lord said. The Sorcerer King is as wise as he is mighty. When they were done looking around the village, or, more accurately, when the women were done with their shopping, they made their way back up to the office by the highway. Rangobart frowned as he examined the attendants attached to Frian. 3 of the footmen from the Wagner household that had accompanied them were bearing large wicker baskets filled with tribal goods. Frian brought one of the baskets into their carriage, emptying it out onto the table between them once they got underway again.
What in the world are you going to do with those?
He asked. I thought they'd make for interesting gifts, Frian replied. He tried to imagine the Emperor wrapped up in a lizardman blanket. You had better not start any weird trends, Rangobart said. The Empire has more than enough changes to deal with on the horizon.
And one of those changes is rewriting our perception of demi-humans.
Is it not? Lady Waldenstein said. Besides, these aren't that bad. A merchant wouldn't be ashamed to use one in the cold months, nor would any one of us in private.
As if to make her point, she unfolded one of the blankets to cover her lap, then draped another one over her shoulders.
Dimmaear picked one up and pressed it against her nose.
What's this made out of?
She asked.
Fibers from marsh plants,
Lady Wagner answered.
It's a weirdly common material.
The tribes pick the stuff from ponds, streams, and lakes. I got no idea how they learned how to make it when it starts out as a plant stalk. It's the most common type of cloth in Zaradnik's territory, as well.
Rangobart reached out to rub the fabric of one of the blankets on the table between his fingers.
The Empire primarily relied upon wool, flax, and cotton for its cloth materials. Silk came from across the Great Steppe, but not in any great quantity. Anything better was notoriously difficult to import.
Could you answer the questions I posed to High Chief Shasha any better, Wagner?
Frian asked. I don't mean to look down on the lizardmen, but he himself admitted that his perception of things is probably not on the same level as ours.
Sure,
Lady Wagner answered. What do you want to know?
In particular,
I'd like to know how the tribes are governed. To be honest, many aspects of the Sorceress Kingdom's domestic policy are a mystery to me. Sometimes, I start thinking that it's something familiar, but then we have cases like the Lizardmen that definitively prove me wrong.
It's pretty simple. Lady Wagner leaned her elbow on her armrest. The only thing that's really applicable to every subject of the Sorceress Kingdom is follow the rules. Most people are content to live their lives in peace, and the tribes in the Great Forest of Tob are mostly those types of people. They usually go on as they always have, and the government doesn't care what they do as long as they don't break the laws that apply to them. Are the laws applied to them different from the laws applied to humans? They weren't then, they were, and then they sort of weren't again. The tribes in the Great Forest of Tob were actually under the Sorceress Kingdom's control before the Battle of Katza Plains. Back then, all that was required was that they recognize the Sorcerer King as their ruler, and they were pretty much left alone aside from that. In the case of the Lizardmen, Lord Cocytus, the Grand Marshal, took an interest in them and became their liege. That didn't change much about their culture, though. He just helped them out here and there and tried to encourage them to do a few things. Even after all that, though, they still mostly live as they did before. And the rules that they were subjected to changed at some point? Yeah, Lady Wagner nodded. When Nerantal was annexed, the Sorceress Kingdom was made an official country. His Majesty decided to adopt the laws of Reastais. Those laws are laws for a human society, though, and the royal court had a heck of a time trying to figure out how to make it work for everyone.
I can imagine, Freyan said.
Rangobot could, as well, but what he couldn't imagine was why they bothered trying in the first place. Was it simply a case of willfulness on the Sorcerer King's part, with his vassals doing their best to see what could be done? Or was there some far-reaching objective spawned from the endless depths of his unfathomable intellect? Anyway,
Lady Wagner said,
most of it actually worked out pretty well in the end. There were just a few sticking points, like His Majesty pledging that our citizens won't eat their fellow citizens. Why would that be a sticking point? Lady Waldenstein asked. Because many of the tribe's major source of food was each other, Lady Wagner answered. We had to scramble to work out a solution for that. All said, it was pretty fun. Fun? What was the solution? Sell them food. That was the primary purpose of those trading outposts that we put up. After we got a good look at what everyone had to offer, it became a lot easier to figure out. It always seems that you have far more interesting tales to tell than us, Freyan said. I couldn't picture myself in your shoes. What sort of story does the Dwarf Kingdom have? You are probably better off hearing that one from them, Lady Wagner said. At least their side of it. Not that it isn't plenty enough. Just like the Empire, they're still a sovereign country, so I'm sure you'll be keen on hearing what they have to share.
It's huge.
Dimir exclaimed, I can't even see the top. Pretty neat, huh? Lady Wagner said, what do you think will happen if I stick my hand in? Your hand will fall off. Stop. Dimir jumped forward and grabbed Lady Wagner, pulling her away from the waterfall's roaring torrent. Rangobot watched them from their carriage, which was parked on a highway nearby. They were deep in a valley below the icy peaks of the Azalizia Mountains, surrounded by a wilderness infused with the scent of conifers and mossy earth. Even at the height of summer, the incessant winds blowing down from the glaciers above made it feel like it could snow at any time. Dimir cast Endure Elements on herself, but I don't think Lady Wagner is a mage. Does she have a magic item? Rangobot shivered despite his own protective enchantments and retreated to the warmth of the carriage. Lady Wagner and Dimir joined them a few minutes later, dripping from head to toe. The Countess leaned toward Dimir, speaking in a low voice that was clearly meant to be heard. He's staring at us. Kya. Even though you're just a Rangobot. Dimir snatched a lizardman blanket from the table and covered herself, letting out a high-pitched sneeze. I should have learned a water removal spell. Rangobot, do you have one? Sorry, I'm just a Rangobot. Their carriage resumed its course up the highway, steadily climbing the northern side of the valley. Lady Wagner rummaged through her bag for a few moments before producing a small, blocky object. Was that? Dimir sniffled. A dryer, Lady Wagner answered. Aren't those illegal? Lady Waldenstein frowned. They are in the Empire, Rangobot said. Dryers were items that could remove water, making them useful for instantly drying soaked objects, be they clothing, carpets, or furniture. The problem was that they usually cast some sort of water destruction spell, which could be used against people. Even without malicious intent, The careless or ignorant could accidentally turn their targets into desiccated husks with the items, and thus tries were outlawed in the Empire for public safety. Do you know how to use that item, Lady Wagner? Rangobart asked.
I think so.
Lady Wagner answered absently as she fiddled with the thing.
I strongly recommend that you remove whatever you want to dry before using the item on them. The three women in the cabin turned their heads to stare at him. As a safety precaution.
Sure, Dimity peered at him. Safety. Lady Wagner reached under her seat and pulled out a long metal bar. She stood to fix it across the ceiling of the cabin and pulled a curtain across it.
Peeking will cost you, Lady Wagner told him before closing the gap on her side.
Wow, your underwear is so classy.
Think so? I gotta say it's something else. Where did you buy it from,
Erantle?
It was a gift. Dimity's voice lowered to a whisper.
From a lover?
It was from my liege.
Did lieges bestow underwear upon their vassals in the Sorceress Kingdom? If you recalled correctly, Lady Wagner served the same liege as Baroness Saradnik, someone whom she referred to as Lady Schultier.
Maybe it was because they were women. No, that didn't make any sense. An annoyed sigh escaped Rangobart's lips. Why was he even thinking about it?
He watched the scenery fly by as he did his best to ignore the continued chatter issuing from behind the curtain. That proved to be a mistake, as he caught a glimpse of Lady Wagner in the window's reflection. Rather than alert the rest of the cabin to his indiscretion, however, the reflection of the Countess winked mischievously back at him.
You can pay in installments, Lady Wagner said. He quickly turned his head from the window.
Friand glowered at him for the next 10 minutes.
Their carriage ascended the mountainside, eventually taking them above the tree line. The voices in the cabin stilled as the highway brought them through an alpine valley carpeted with wildflowers. Dimity was born for this very moment.
This scenery is breathtaking, Friand said. Are there any artists who paint this landscape?
I don't know about paintings, Lady Wagner said, but I do know the composer of Winter's Crown.
Truly?
Friand ripped the curtain aside.
Do you know if they take requests for private concerts?
That's a good question, Lady Wagner said. I never thought to ask.
Then, is it possible to meet them?
Unfortunately, not right now.
She was originally from Fioberkana, but she's gone off to see the world.
A disappointed sigh filled the cabin.
She's the only artist that my grandmother has shown any interest in for as long as I can remember, Friand said.
I hoped that I could surprise her.
I'm sure she'll be back eventually,
Lady Wagner said.
I'll let you know when she does.
You are so lucky,
Dimity pouted. You know so many famous people. First, the dreamer. Now, a bard that creates original compositions.
Do you know Darkness, as well?
Yup.
I speak with Moman the Black on a semi-regular basis.
No fair. If you land a post on that diplomatic mission,
Lady Wagner said, I could introduce you to all of them.
I'm working on it. I have to turn my experiences here to my advantage somehow. Wouldn't she be introduced to most of them anyway? Ambassadors got to know all of the movers and shakers in the country where their mission was based as a matter of their profession, so Lady Wagner's offer shouldn't have been very enticing. How long until we arrive in Fioberkana? Rangobart asked. In response, Lady Wagner produced a map and laid it out on the table between them. The waterfall just now was the halfway point. She pointed to a spot under the southern ranges. It'll be less than an hour before we arrive at Fiorizo. Rangobart examined the map, taking the time to note features that didn't exist to Imperial knowledge. In most of their maps, the Azalizia Mountains and the forests that covered its slopes were depicted by a highly stylized representation that didn't accurately portray anything at all. At best, the maps indicated the general area where Theodoras should be. Lady Wagner's map, on the other hand, was detailed beyond the exhaustive official maps of the Imperial Heartland. Seemingly every crag and ravine was documented, and a complex, overlapping web of territories, settlements, and notable features was overlaid atop the topography. I can't decide whether to be amazed or confused at this map, Rangobart said. How in the world did you manage to compile so much information? This is the map created by the Adventurer Guild's Azalisian expedition, Lady Wagner told them.
Pretty crazy, huh?
It's an uncomfortably high level of detail, Rangobart said. Countries would usually execute people as spies for possessing a map like this. Does the general public have access to this information? I'm not sure that the general public even knows or cares that this exists. The tribes of the region all have their little pieces of it, though.
You mean there are maps of even greater detail than this?
Yep. If you hire our adventurer guild to survey your land, this is the quality of work you can expect. Lady Wagner pulled out another map. This time it was one of the Alpine Valley they were traversing. It even has mineral veins and horticultural resources, he murmured. I didn't know adventurers did this sort of work.
Plain old adventurers don't, Lady Wagner said.
Our adventurer guild is a different organization entirely. They're a government institution dedicated to exploration and cultural exchange.
Rangobot pored over the details of the map, mulling over the possibilities it presented. Even without the discount rate offered by the Sorcerer King, it would be foolish not to take advantage of their services.
Are you considering hiring them?
Frian asked. I don't think I have much of a choice, Rangobot replied. Speaking of which, that letter you delivered to me, Lady Wagner, why did it have the Sorcerer King's seal on it?
I wouldn't overthink it if I were you,
Lady Wagner said. His Majesty just does that sort of thing once in a while. What did you do, Rangobot?
Frian's accusatory gaze bored into his temple.
Nothing.
Rangobot protested. I was speaking with Lady Wagner about all of the new titles being handed out and the burden it placed on the Imperial Survey Corps. She suggested that I commission the Sorceress Kingdom's Adventurer Guild instead of waiting however many years it takes for the Empire to get around to scouting my territory.
The next morning,
I received an offer that included all of their expeditionary services. The cover letter was a bit strange, but it implies that it's from the Sorcerer King himself.
It is, Lady Wagner said.
Are you certain, my lady?
He still couldn't believe that the Sorcerer King would do that.
Not that he personally knew him or even had some idea of what he was like, but it didn't fit the image of a ruler of death at all.
Of course I'm certain.
Lady Wagner told him, I delivered the thing myself, you know. You did?
I did.
After we spoke, I rode over to Erantle to rustle up what you were looking for.
You rode all the way to Erantle to,
rustle this up from the Sorcerer King?
No, from the Adventurer Guild.
Erantle's only 10 minutes from Corlin Harbor by Solita. Anyway, after I picked up the details, I figured His Majesty would want to know, so I walked over to his place to tell him about it. He was understandably excited about your interest and that resulted in the letter.
Why would he get excited about something like that? What's his objective? Try as he might, he couldn't think of anything.
He could only console himself over the fact that he was naturally no match for the vast intellect of the Sorcerer King. I think you're right, Rangobot, Frian said.
You don't have a choice. This is an offer you can't refuse. Still,
Wagner, I never realized you were so close to the Sorcerer King.
I do speak with him once in a while, but it's not so much a matter of being close as it's just the way that the Sorceress Kingdom works. It's an absolute monarchy.
Like absolute. It's not like the Empire where the Emperor maintains the power required to act as an absolute sovereign through all sorts of political machinations. The Sorceress Kingdom is a place where the boss is the boss because he's supposed to be the boss, and no one disputes that. This totally changes how things are run and how the rules work. What one is and what they're supposed to be doing is everything. Personal, political, and economic clout that other places are accustomed to juggling to maintain power don't matter. Rangobot exchanged looks with Frian and Dimaia. They appeared to be just as confused as he was.
I don't understand this at all, Frian said.
For simplicity's sake, what does this mean for you? Countess Wagner is Countess Wagner because she's Countess Wagner, and Countess Wagner does Countess Wagner things. That's an absolute within the absolute hierarchy of the Sorceress Kingdom, and those within that hierarchy consider Countess Wagner being Countess Wagner perfectly in line with the natural order of things. Now I am even more confused.
I know, right? Countess Wagner said.
Don't worry about it, though. As long as Countess Wagner is Countess Wagner, everything is fine as far as Countess Wagner is concerned. Even if she said not to worry about it, Rangobot couldn't help but try to make sense of what she was saying. It didn't seem like any recognizable framework for a working system of governance. Existence wasn't enough to create order and enforce hierarchy. Some sort of power had to back it up. So, you mean to say that the Sorcerer King is such a powerful existence that everyone submits to his absolute rule? Rangobot asked.
No, I meant what I said.
The Sorcerer King simply is what he is, and that's enough for anyone that matters. Again, it's better not to think about it because humans can't help but think like humans. You are a human, right? Sure am.
Lady Wagner smiled.
Did Countess Corlin and Baroness Zaradnik share the same understanding? They didn't show any hint of what Countess Wagner just went over at all. Does this logic apply to the Baharuth Empire? Frian asked.
Yes and no, Lady Wagner answered.
They don't expect humans or mortals in general to understand why they do what they do. Let's see. Do you recall the amendment to imperial law emphasizing the absolute nature of the Sorcerer King and his agents?
Of course.
There's a reason why it's so vaguely worded, and it has to do with what I talked about. Everyone who qualifies for a certain level of authority in the Sorcerer's Kingdom acts as an agent of the Sorcerer King's will. There are different levels, of course, but, overall, the dynamic is treated as absolute and incorruptible. An agent of the Sorcerer King acting in the Empire is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they don't do what they aren't supposed to. To us, that law isn't vaguely worded at all, it is supremely flexible and specific to every situation. That's a difficult thing to digest. You learn quickly if you live here. It's just the way things are. 30 minutes later, their carriage rolled up through a stretch of wind-swept moorland where a lone stone building stood. Just past it was what Rangobart could only describe as a crack in the mountain face. They went straight in without slowing down and the world was engulfed in darkness. What's going on now? Uncertainty colored Frian's voice. This is the entrance to Fiorizo, Lady Wagner told them. The building we passed just now was the post office. Shouldn't it be in the city if that's the case? More people live outside. Fiorizo used to be a small city before the demon gods came along. Nowadays, most of the mountain dwarf population lives in Fioburkana. This place was originally founded as a mining outpost and it's gone back to being just that. What do they mine here? Rangobart asked. Every metal that I can think of, Lady Wagner said, in various quantities. The outpost was originally set up to mine something called white iron, though. Is it related to white silver? No idea. I haven't been able to get my hands on any. Their carriage finally slowed, following a route that only had the occasional torch lighting the way. He couldn't make out any details in the dim environment. If they passed any dwarves, he didn't spot them. It doesn't seem very lively here, Dimir said. It's more lively than it looks, Lady Wagner replied. We are just not very good at seeing in the dark. Even with dark vision items, the realms below take some getting used to. Speaking of which, does anyone need one? Dimir has her glasses, Dimir said. If you don't mind, Frian said. I'd appreciate one, as well, Rangobart nodded. Lady Wagner activated the cabin lights and placed a pair of rings on the table. I guess this means that the other guests won't have them. For the most part, no, Frian said. Footmen on night patrols sometimes have dark vision items, but they're not common. It's a good thing we packed a bunch. We'll be stopping by the mining guild here to take a look at their operations. House Gushanan's still interested in that, I assume? Yes, that's right. Rangobart slipped the ring onto his middle finger, but it didn't seem to improve the view outside. It wasn't until the carriage was nearly stopped that he could make out the details of the building that they were pulling up in front of. It was a blocky, imposing structure reminiscent of what he had seen in Zwilling's. Lady Wagner opened the door and hopped out, casually waving at a trio of squat, bearded humanoids lined up on the curb. Countess Wagner, the dwarf in the center, inclined his head. Hey, Guildmaster. Here's the first round. The Guildmaster peered at them from behind his bushy beard. That's them, huh? They don't look any different. Some of the boys from the Merchant Guild say that Imperials are a stuffy lot, though. I'm sure they'll consider it flavor if you act dwarfy enough. We're standing right here, you know. With a swirl of her shortened skirts, Lady Wagner spun around and gestured toward them. This is Frian Gushmund, representing her family's silver mines. She's here to take a look at your operations. The one in the glasses is Dimir. She works for the Empire's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Rangobart is Rangobart. It's good of you to stop by. The dwarf stroked his braided brown beard. Name's Hobar Granitshield, master of the Fiorizo Mining Guild. This is my son, Hobar, and my niece, Bren. Niece? He couldn't figure out how to tell Bren apart from the others. They all had beards and resembled lumps of weathered stone. After a moment, he realized that she was staring back at him. "How do the guilds work in dwarven society?" Rangobart asked.
What do you mean by that? The Empire has mines and guilds, but there is no mining guild. I was wondering how it compares to what we're familiar with.
Guildmaster Hobar's face crinkled to the degree that it looked about to implode on itself.
No mining guild? The life of a miner is filled with dangers. Who ensures their lives and livelihoods if there's no guild? I have no idea. Rangobart glanced at Frianne. Frianne cleared her throat.
Much like our farming villages, which also have no farming guild, our mining villages are managed by chiefs. Priests visit semi-regularly to tend to the villagers' health.
What about daily operations? What sort of mining do you do? It depends on the site, but it's mostly open-pit mining.
Open-pit mining, and you say you mine silver?
That's right.
The guildmaster exchanged a look with his companions. Is something the matter? Frianne asked. You mentioned silver mining, but surely there are other things that come along with all that silver you dig up. Well, humans supposedly breed like goblins, so I guess it's not a problem like it would be for dwarves. Let's start our tour, eh? They were led past the guild office, following a narrow set of iron rails that led to a cavern wall. The trek was rather disorienting, as their dark vision range was limited and all they saw aside from the ground was pitch black until they drew within 20 meters of something. That something, in this case, was another building seemingly cut out of the stone. Rangobart ducked under the doorframe as he entered behind their guide. Grey Mantle. The hell are ya? Right in front of you, you wrinkled old mushroom. Rangobart started as the guildmaster suddenly shouted, then started again as a dwarf behind a nearby counter shouted back. He looked just like the first three dwarves, except he had a black beard. Some of the humans they talked about showed up. The guildmaster jerked a thumb over his shoulder. That so? Try Berkana 3. The guildmaster grunted and walked by, gesturing for them to follow. What's Berkana 3? Dimir asked. Nothing special, the guildmaster answered. The mountain dwarves are sort of practical, Lady Wagner said. What do you mean, sort of? The guildmaster snarled. By sort of, I meant sort of, Lady Wagner smiled pleasantly. Berkana is a letter. 3 is a number. We're going to the third branch of the Berkana sector. Isn't their capital named Fio Berkana? Frianne asked. Yep. Berkana, Jura, Rizo, and Tivaz are all letters. So the capital is something like Citia. Or maybe Citia of Countrya. It's so plain that it's forgettable. Says Miss Model R, the guildmaster scoffed. Hey. The Model R has a respectable history. Humph. You can't claim that till it's been around for at least 2 centuries. I bet my beard that you have a Model S already. The tunnel they were following led them to a dimly lit chamber furnished with rows of stone lockers. Another dwarf was seated on a stone stool behind a stone desk. It looked like everything had been fashioned out of the very same material that the tunnel was carved out of. Who are they? The dwarf at the table frowned up at them. Some humans come to see the mines. We got a crew in Berkana 3? Yeah. They should be working on that flooded section. The guildmaster kept going. Rangobart glanced at the dwarf sitting behind the table as he walked past. A mage? A priest, the guildmaster said. Every crew coming in from a shift gets their health checked. Mines are filled with hazards. There's dangerous dust and gas that miners can breathe in and the water isn't safe. Some minerals are poisonous to the touch and there are creatures in the stone that can invade the body. Oh, and there are plenty of monsters in the realms below, but at least we got that part covered with the Sorceress Kingdom's help. The tunnel widened into another chamber where the familiar tread of Death Knight boots sounded rhythmically over the stone. When they reached the source, the rails ended and they found a group of Death Knights going in circles around an unfamiliar device. This here's a pump manufactured by House Wagner's workshops, Lady Wagner said. It turns out that there's water everywhere underground. We cut our shafts so they won't easily flood, the guildmaster said, but there are isolated caverns in the earth and the earth itself never stays still. These pumps are handy for reclaiming all the old networks around here. What are the pipes made out of? Frianne asked. Lead. Not the greatest material, but it's plentiful and easy to work with. The water we pump out can be pretty nasty stuff, Some bodies can eat through new piping in less than a week or just clog it up. It all gets dumped into the tailings channel and ends up in the magma chambers north of here. From there, it goes out the gates.
The gates?
Yeah. The magma chamber's an artificial one.
Accessing a natural one would be catastrophic.
Molten rock comes through a magical gate from somewhere and flows out a different one to elsewhere.
That seems awfully convenient.
Well, one can only assume that it's there to get stuff in and out.
Not that we dwarves have the artifice to craft gates like that, but it's a big world.
Where do they go?
We don't know. There aren't any active volcanic areas in the Azalizia Mountains, so.
The guildmaster led them onward into a tunnel marked by an unfamiliar sign. He followed the lead piping, going through a maze of several dozen forks before the sound of metal periodically striking stone could be heard in the distance. By the time they came within sight of a well-lit tunnel,
Rangobut's back was sore from being half bent.
A dwarf garbed in some sort of leather outfit turned at the sound of their approach.
Guildmaster, she nodded. I brought guests.
Everyone, this is Greta Redstone, the shift's tunnel doctor. A magic caster? Freyan said, some variant of druid, perhaps? No, dwarven druids are extremely rare, Greta said. Tunnel doctor is just local slang.
We're geomancers.
Ah, that's interesting. The Empire has always categorized geomancy as an Eastern discipline. I can only assume it's a common enough profession in the realms below. Greta gestured loosely over her head with a gloved hand. For obvious reasons. What's the role of tunnel doctors in the mining industry? Freyan asked. Divination and structural engineering, mainly. Well, there's not much divination going on here. We've been going through all of the old records and reclaiming shafts that haven't been mined out yet. The guildmaster cleared his throat. How's that coming along, by the way? We've drained out enough water to expose the fringes of the vein. The crew's taking samples now. They shifted their way forward to where the shaft was submerged in ominous black water. 4 skeletons were lined up at the water's edge while a pair of dwarves chipped away at a rust-colored section of tunnel wall. Behind them was a minecart half filled with the aforementioned samples. What do you have here? Rangobut asked. Iron ore, the guildmaster answered. It's nothing fancy, but the sorceress kingdom has an endless appetite for steel. Undead labor is ideal for it, too. Once the shaft is drained and Greta figures out how to proceed, we'll set a bunch of them to digging. Are you implying that undead labor isn't ideal for some tasks? Freyan asked. It's ultimately a cost-benefit analysis. The guildmaster gestured to the skeletons. These fellows can't match an experienced miner, and mining more difficult materials is out of the question. Mundane metals that we mine in bulk, however, are perfect for them. The way we have things set up now frees up our experienced members to go for all the precious loads while the undead handle everything else. In your opinion, are they suitable for silver mining? The guildmaster raised a hand to stroke his beard in thought. That would depend on how valuable silver is in the Empire, he said. It also depends on what else those mines produce. Silver is usually the byproduct of mining something else, say, lead or copper. It's entirely possible for undead labor to pull up more total value in common metals than your veteran miners can of silver in the same time. And it's not as if you won't get any silver, you'll just get a bit less with a skeleton. Is that so? It's not? Freyan and the guildmaster stared at one another for a moment. Then, the guildmaster shrugged. That's my professional assessment based on our results with the undead so far. It's always better to send your best miners into your best mines. The silver comparison is a pointless one when your veteran miners shouldn't be wasting their time on anything less than mithril anyways. I see. Rangobut wasn't a mining expert, but, as far as he knew, it didn't matter who dug up what. The guildmaster's claim was reminiscent of the Empire's early past, where nobles asserted that their farms produced more than the imperial standard. Those claims were dismissed as irrational interpretations of natural fluctuations in crop yields, and the Imperial Magic Academy made sure that its students no longer believed such nonsense. What other benefits would you say come with employing undead labor? Freyan asked. Not that tireless workers aren't a benefit enough, the guildmaster answered, but there are the alterations in mining strategy that I mentioned just now. Mitigating deadly risks to your miners is also a major benefit, especially over long periods, but I'm not sure if humans care about that sort of thing.
We most certainly do,
Guildmaster,
Frian said.
I don't think anyone in the Empire would disagree that ensuring the safety of experienced and talented individuals is a desirable thing. Does that mean you're ready to rent some undead?
Lady Wagner leaned in.
I will deliver my findings to my Lord Father when I return to our winter,
Lady Waldenstein replied.
Let's see what else the Dwarven Kingdom has to offer, shall we?